In section 6.3, let's take a look at some inequalities. For question number 1, I need to label the inequalities as true or false. So for question 1a, is 5 less than or equal to 5? Well, 5 is not less than 5, but is definitely equal to 5, so this statement has to be true. For letter B, I have is 5 less than or equal to negative 5? And that's not true. The true statement would be 5 is greater or equal to negative 5. So this one has to be false. Okay, moving on to letter C here. Is negative 5 less than or equal to 5? It sure is. Negative 5 is definitely smaller than 5. So this one is true. For letter D, is 5 less than 5? Well, 5 is not less than 5 because 5 actually equals to 5. So this statement has to be false. If it was 5 is less than or equal to 5, then that would be correct, but it's definitely not less than by itself. Okay, moving on to letter E, is 1 over 3 greater than 1 over 4? Well, 1 over 3 is going to be roughly 0.33. Is that greater than 0.25? And that one is true. Moving on to letter F, is negative 1 over 3 greater than negative 1 over 4? Well, negative 1 over 3 is negative 0.33. Is that going to be greater than negative 0.25? Well, this statement is going to be false. You can just graph this on a number line if you're not sure. 0 is over here, negative 1 is there. And I would say roughly this would be negative 0.33. And over here would be negative 0.25. So if you're closer to the 0, that would make you a bigger number. So negative 0.25 is actually bigger than negative 0.33. So that statement is false. Letter G, is 0.3 less than or equal to 1 over 3? This statement is going to be true because if you think about the decimal expansion of 1 over 3, that's 0.333 repeating, and that's going to be definitely bigger than 0.3. So this statement is going to be true. For letter H, if you put negative signs on both statements, this statement is going to be false. So the question is negative 0.3 less than or equal to negative 0.333 repeating? This one's actually going to be false. It's actually the other way around. Negative 0.3. This statement in blue is actually bigger than this statement here in green. So letter H, the statement is false. And for the last two, we're just comparing numbers here. So pi, which is about 3.14, is that greater than 3? That's definitely true. Is negative 3.14, is that greater than negative 0.333 repeating? That one's false because this number here is actually bigger than negative a negative 0.33 repeating is actually bigger than negative pi. So the correct statement here would be this. So this statement here has to be false. Okay, so for letters A to J on question number 1 is just kind of testing you whether you can determine which number is bigger or not. And if you're not sure, just put the numbers on a number line. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. For question number 2, we just have to do some of the odd problems. So I need to translate the following into an inequality. Starting with question 2a, a number is at least 3. So for my numbers here, you can use x or n. I'll just use x here. So a number is at least 3. So that means the number has to be bigger or equal to 3. So x is greater or equal to 3 would satisfy the condition there. Let's go ahead and do letter C next. For letter C, the book weighs less than 1 kilogram. Okay, so let's just say the x is the book and it weighs less than 1 kilogram. So I'll say x is less than 1. All right, so that's an acceptable answer. A better answer would be, we know x is going to be less than 1, right? It has to be less than 1 kilogram, but it has to be greater or equal to 0, right? Because a book can't weigh, well, I guess you can say, actually, I would rather just say x is just greater than 0 just because, for a book, it has to weigh something, so it can't be nothing. So this statement right here in the orange box is saying that we're less than 1, but we're also greater than 0. So when we're greater than 0, we're stating that the weight cannot be negative. So that might be a better statement, but this statement here is also going to be acceptable there as well. Okay, let's move on to letter E. The cost of gas is less than 95 cents per liter. So it's less than, so it doesn't equal to 95. So let's just say the cost of gas is X. So that would mean X is going to be less than 95. And that's it for that particular question. Sorry, it's 95 cents, so let's put a decimal there. So X is less than 0.95. Okay, let's move on to letter G. The baby's temperature will not exceed 100 degrees Celsius. So it will not exceed 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, so it can be 100 degrees Celsius, but it can't be over. So if I let the temperature be X, I can say X is less than or equal to 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, let's move on to I. You must not gain more than 2 kilograms. Okay, so you must not gain more than 2 kilograms. All right, so you can definitely weigh 2 kilograms, but you can't go past 2 kilograms. So let's just say X is going to be less than or equal to 2. So that statement is correct. I'll definitely mark that correct, but let's just have a greater than 0 there as well, because that means that you have to be greater than 0, because I'm assuming you're measuring the weight of an object, and we'll just assume that we're we're on Earth, and if we're weighing something, we're going to assume that there's some mass to it. So I can take X is less than or equal to 2, or you can also put this greater than 0 sign there. I'll mark both of those correct. And I know we don't do letter J, but this one's an easy one. You must be at least 1.6 meters tall, so that's just X is greater or equal to 1.6. Okay, let's move on to question number 3 now. Graph on a number line. So these questions aren't too bad. I believe for question number 3, we're just doing some of the odd ones. So X is greater or equal to -2. So since you have this equals to sign right there, that means you have a closed circle. So at -2, you have a closed circle, and since you're greater or equal to -2, you're just shading everything to the right hand side of -2, and that's it. Let's just do B here just for practice here. Y is less than 4, so since it's just less than, this is going to be an open circle. So where's 4 on the number line? It's right there, and since you're less than that, you're shading everything to the left of 4. Okay, for letter C, Z is greater than 0. So if it's greater than with no equal sign, this is a open circle. Okay, so where's 0? It's right there, open circle. And since we're greater than that, we're shading everything to the right hand side of 0. For letter D, A is less than or equal to 3. Since there's an equal sign, this is a closed circle. So locate 3 on the number line, which is right there. There's my closed circle. If you're less than that, you're shading everything to the left-hand side. For letter E, B is greater than -1/2. Well, since it's greater than, this is a open circle. Now locate -1/2 on the number line. So -1/2, it's about right. Sorry, it's about right here. So let's just put a -1/2, and we'll put an open sign or an open circle there, and that means we just shade everything to the right hand side of -1/2. Okay, let's move on to some of the other ones that we're assigned to do, starting with letter G here. Now for letter G, I recommend that you put the variable on the left hand side first. So here's my variable. Let's put that on the left hand side. So if I read this, D is less than -10/3. So let's copy the less than sign, and then we'll write the -10/3 over here. Now -10/3, that's roughly going to be -3.33 repeating. So let's go find -3.33 repeating on the number line. That's about here. This is -3.33 repeating, and we have an open circle, and since it's less than, we just shade to the left, and that's it for that one. We're done with that. Okay, let's move on to letter I here. Once again, the variable is on the right hand side, so let's just rearrange it by writing on the left hand side. and that's going to be f is less than or equal to negative 3.33 repeating. Actually, this is very similar to the problem that we just did. So at negative 3.33 repeating, that's about here. And by this time we have a closed circle, and we shade to the left because it's less than. Okay, let's move on to a few more inequality problems from section 6.3. We also have question number 5. For question number 5, write an inequality statement for each number line below. Okay, so for this one, we're kind of moving away from negative 2. So since we're moving to the left, it's going to be x is less than because we're moving to the left. And then we're just going to put the negative 2 number on the right-hand side, and that's it. For letter B, it seems like we're starting at negative 2.5 there, and we're shading to the right-hand side, and there's a closed circle there. So that means x is greater or equal to negative 2 1/2. And that's it for letter B. For letter C, it looks like we're starting at 3 1/3, and we're shading to the left-hand side, and we have a closed circle there. So this is going to be x is less than or equal to, because we're shading to the left, and there's an equal sign because it's a closed circle, and this will be 3 1/3. And that's it for that one. And moving on to letter D now. It seems that we're starting at a half here, and we're shading to the right hand side, and there's an open circle there, right? So this is going to be a greater than inequality. So x is greater than 1/2. Okay. And finally, for letter E, we have one of those classic cases where you're in between two numbers. So you're in between negative 2 and 3. So if you're in between two numbers, I would put the low number on the left hand side, and I would put the higher number on the right hand side. And since you're in between, just put the variable in the middle, and the signs always point to the left hand sides like that. And since you have a closed circle at 3, just put a equal sign there, and that should take care of the problem. And that's how you can always write an inequality for expressions where you're in between two numbers. Okay, let's go on to question number 6 here. Graph the sentence on the number line provided. Bill will lose between, he will lose between 1 and 4 kilograms. So if you will lose, basically you need to have closed circles here. So since you're losing between 1 and 4 kilograms, there's two possible answers that I think are okay for 6A here. Since you're losing between 1 and 4, some people interpret lose as being dealing with negative numbers. So you could put a closed circle between negative 1 and negative 4, and you can just shade in between. So since we're dealing with the expression lose, some people interpret that as the numbers being negative. Another answer that I think is totally acceptable is if you want to shade between 1 and 4, and we'll say that the weight, you're always losing in that region there. But these are two answers that I think are quite acceptable for this problem. I think most people know that weight is a positive expression. So so that could be illustrated by the green number line. But if you read the word lose, you can also translate that with a negative expression. So this answer right here is also totally fine for 6A. Okay, let's move on to 6B here. The temperature today will be at least 2 degrees Celsius, but less than 5 degrees Celsius. So you will be at least 2 degrees Celsius, but less than 5. So this is one of those in-between type of answers here. So you're at least 2 degrees Celsius. So a closed circle there. And but then less than 5 degrees Celsius. So an open circle at 5, and then just shade in between there. And that should take care of that. Okay, let's move on to letter C. For letter C, the amount of sunlight will not exceed 4 hours today. So we can't go more than 4 hours. So we can definitely be at 4 hours. We just can't be more than 4 hours. Now for sunlight, we're going to assume that you're going to have no sunlight or some sunlight. So we're going to assume that for these particular cases here, the amount of sunlight you can definitely have no sunlight, which would be at 0. We're going to assume that time can't be negative here. So let's just assume that you can be at 0 and you're between 0 and 4 here. Okay, so we can't go past 4, but we can be 4. That's why we have a closed circle there. And since we're dealing with the amount of time of sunlight, we're going to assume that the least amount that you can have is nothing there. So it's going to be greater or equal to 0 in terms of the amount of time of sunlight you have in a day. But you can't be having a negative time of sunlight. So we got to be at least 0, but no more than 4. And using the same kind of thinking for letter D, because it's very similar, now we're saying that the amount of sunlight will be less than 4 hours today. So since it's less than 4 hours, we're going to have an open circle at 4, but we'll continue to have a closed circle at 0. So less than 4 means we can't be 4, so we'll have we'll have an open circle at 4 in this case. For letter E, a number is not between -1 and 3. Not between, but we can definitely be -1 and 3. So since we're not between those two numbers, we got to shade away from that region. So that right there would be an acceptable answer for letter E. For letter F, the temperature is at most -2 degrees Celsius is at most. So I guess we can be -2 degrees Celsius, and I guess the temperature will be to the left hand side of -2. Okay, letter G, the body weighs more than 3 kilograms, right? So we can't be 3, but we can be more than that. So that's just shading to the right hand side. And finally, its weight cannot vary by more than 1.5 kilograms. Okay, so I guess what this is saying is whatever your weight is, you can go more than 1.5 or less than 1.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to center the mass around here. This is the center. And if we want to be more than 1.5, I guess we're going to be in this region. But we can also like lose 1.5. So I guess that's somewhere in this region right here. That's -1.5. And that's going to be positive 1.5. So we want to be within this region, right? We can't vary more than 1.5, so I'll put closed circles there to kind of finish off the problem there. Okay, so that concludes section 6.3. I can definitely say that some of these questions you can argue for alternate solutions, but here's the ones that provided are a good way to start off.